Okay, so Jason asked me to lead tonight. Unfortunately for you guys, fortunately for me, I've been in 1 Samuel in my personal quiet time and in Sunday school, and I was excited about teaching. I can't say I'm always excited about teaching, but I was this time. And so I don't think he thought that I would stick with 1 Samuel and do the next chapter, but we're going to do it. We're going to tackle it. So I listened to his lesson last week. I wasn't here for it, but I listened to it, and it only added more excitement for me as we're going to be in chapter 30. So the verses won't be on the screen tonight. We're going to have to just do it the old-fashioned way. We'll read it together and then go through it. So for my benefit, I want to do a bit more of a recap than what Jason does. So we're going to kind of look back at the last few chapters just to make sure we're all on the same page of what's been happening, how God has been moving, and that's really going to lead and guide our discussion through chapter 30. So, chapter 27, we're going to start a few chapters before, and we're going to start there, jump back a little bit further, and then get into chapter 30. So, first part of chapter 27, David decides to go to the Philistines, to King, I think Jason pronounced it Achish. Is that? Yeah. Achish? We'll go with that. Who's king of Gath. Has he been there before? Has David been? Yeah. When was David there? I'm sorry?
He slayed Goliath.
So Goliath was from Gath. I don't remember if that battle was in. Goliath was from Gath. Was he? I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Oh. Yes, so the connection to Gath is Goliath. The last time he was there was when Jonathan said, "My dad's coming after you." He was hiding in the rocks. He shot the arrows, came out. They said their goodbyes. He takes off to seek safer land, and he goes there. Anybody remember kind of what happened once he got there? He acted crazy. So he goes there to hide from Saul, and he pretends to be insane. And what does Achish say about him? Yeah, I've got all the crazy people I need. I don't need one more. What's this guy doing here? Somebody asked him to leave. So David stayed just a short while before he moved on, went back, and then the chase continued through Israel as Saul continued to try to kill him. That's right. On his way there, he stopped off and he talked to Elimelech, the high priest. And anybody remember the conversation between him and the high priest on his way to Gath? He wanted the holy presence bread, yep. He kind of, I don't remember if he outright lied about needing the bread. I think he told him that Saul had told him it was okay to come and do this, so he is either a half-truth or a full lie, but he kind of talked his way into the bread. Elimelech had no reason not to believe him, gave it to him. He asked for a sword as well. The only sword that they had was the sword, Goliath's sword, the one that he cut his head off with. So he gets that sword back on his way to then Gath with the sword that would make him stand out, would be make him an enemy. It would remind them that he's an enemy. But anyway, he takes it, and there he goes. So who is with David as he goes? Anybody remember that? I know this is kind of a history lesson. I'm testing you. Doug was there with him. As Jason called him. That's not who I'm talking about. So he was there in that scene, but when he's leaving Doug and with the sword and all that stuff, it says he takes some people with him. Anybody remember who that is? It ends up being 600 men. He does have his wives with him. It says somewhere he takes his father's household, his brothers, and some men from that area. And there's a description of those men. There's 3 types of men. Anyone find that? All right, I'll tell you. I won't make you guess. Everyone who was in distress, who was in debt, and who was bitter in soul, kind of, not everyone, but men who were in distress, in debt, and bitter in soul went with him, along with his father's household and his brothers. So those are the men that are all going with him to make up his 400, 600 men that he takes on to Gath. So anyway, we kind of have the who, what, where now. They're heading out. After they leave, later in chapter 22, what happens to Doug? What does Doug do? Saul shows up looking for David. Doug snitches. Saul's very unhappy. He tells his commanders to do what? Kill all the priests. Commanders say, no, I won't do it. These are God's people. We're not going to do it. So who steps up? Doug steps up and kills them all. 80 Elimelech and 84 other priests. But someone escapes. Elimelech's son, Abiathar. Okay. Sorry, I know this is a lot of recap, but I think it all ties into what we're going to go over later. So just trying to refresh all of our memories on all of this, because there's so many little pieces that tie in that I found very interesting. Okay, so that's chapter 21, 22, back into 27, where where David is now. David gets to Achish in Gath again. Last time he was there, he was crazy. This time he shows up again. And what does Achish tell him? How's he welcomed?
He's there for a year and 4 months.
Yeah, he's welcomed favorably. He settles in. David goes so far as to ask King Achish for land, his own little town. So Achish gives him a whole town. He and his 600 compatriots go down there and they settle in, and they're there for a while. What does David do during that year and 4 months? Raids who? Israel? Other people groups. Amalekites, Geshurites, and Girzites. But what does he tell King Achish that he's doing? He tells Achish he's raiding Israel. He's lying to the king while plundering these other people groups and kind of living the double life. And that gets into what I think Jason taught on last week. So we'll get there again. So chapter 28, the Philistines gather for war at Aphek. So the northern territory. Achish tells David he has to come with him and protect him. He trusts him. He trusts him with his own life. He's going to be his personal security guard. And David says what? Sure. Yep. I'm your man. Yeah. I'm faithful. You can trust me. And at the same time, so chapter 28 starts off, they're gathering for war. It jumps back to Saul and what he's doing. Saul's getting nervous. War's about to happen. He doesn't know who to go to and who to ask. So he goes up to Endor, consults the medium, revives Samuel's ghost. Samuel tells him, you're going to die. He doesn't like that, but the next day, all that happens. Just a personal question. Do you guys think David was really going to fight for the Philistines, or do you think he was going to take the side of the Israelites? What side do you think David was going to be on? He said, I'm going to protect you, King Achish. He'd been disowned from Israel for over a year. He seemed to be loyal. What was he really going to do? What was his intentions? You think he would have turned on the Philistines? Yes. Anybody else think he would have? Yes. Everyone seems to be in agreement. He was going to turn on the Philistines. He was going to go to war with them and turn on them once he got to battle. What makes you think that?
He's God's man.
He still had a heart for God. Yeah. Some commentaries argue that because he took all of his men with him, it was a sign that he needed every hand to help fight and turn on the Philistines. If he was really fighting with the Philistines alongside them, he'd have left some men back home to protect the town, protect the people. But because he took them all with him, that was a sign that they were going to all in against us. Anyway, I don't know if that's true, just commentary, speculation, but the commentaries agree with you guys. I think it's an interesting question. I'm not sure what he would have done. I'm not sure where his heart was at. I mean, I know he's still seeking God. He still shows faithfulness. There's just lots of question marks for me.
And he may not have known
Yeah, maybe he didn't know either. Okay, so that's my brief summary of 27, while jumping back to 21, 22, and 28. So we're going to pause here before we get into the overview of 29 and then into our verses of 30. At this point, what is God's plan? What do we know that God's plan is for the Philistines and Israel? What's going to happen?
Israel's going to be turned over to the Philistines.
Yep, the Philistines are going to conquer Israel. So at this point, when David's promising to go to war with the Philistines, we know, because we have God's word, but the Philistines are going to win. They're going to destroy Israel. So David's plans, whatever they are, if they are to turn on the Philistines, are fruitless because God's going to give them over. What do we know that God's plans are for David and David's family? He's going to become king. Yep. And his family is going to, God's going to bless his family. It's going to grow. So at this moment, David thinks he's going to battle. He thinks he's going to turn on this huge Philistine army and protect Israel, and he'd be way outnumbered. And yet we know what God's plans are. But David's agreeing to go to battle, and that's where he is. I think Jason described it as being stuck. He was stuck between admitting that he's been lying and admitting all the wrong he's been doing, or trying to stick with his personal plan of going with them, becoming a traitor against the Philistines to protect his people and protect his God. So anyway, he's stuck in a hard spot. Going into last week's chapter 29, what happens when it starts the chapter? What do the other Philistine kings or commanders say? Heck no. That guy's killed thousands of Philistines. There's no way we're going to let him come be your personal bodyguard. We don't trust him. And King Achish says, he says okay eventually, but what, does he argue at first?
He still thinks David's going to be loyal to him.
He trusts David. He says several times, he swears by the Lord your God, swears by Yahweh, that David's an honest man. He's a good man. He hasn't lied to him. He finds no fault in David. And the whole time we know what David's been doing. Our recap is David's been raiding other people, been lying to the king. He's got some sin issues in his life, maybe even fleeing Israel and going to Philistine in the first place was a lack of faith in God. All these little issues that we see, from 30,000 feet looking down on it. But King Achish has absolute trust in him. And the other kings say, no way. David kind of gets saved from himself. And in the last verse of chapter 29, David sets out to go back to Ziklag. Okay. Only took 15 minutes for a little recap. My memory's bad, so I need to refresh my memory before I get into stuff, just to make sure I have all the pieces straight, all the people straight, all the connections straight, and then hopefully we can dive in. My next thing, I don't know how well you guys can see it. On my phone, I can hold it closer to my face, but the picture up on the screen may be harder for you guys to see. Just so we can picture it together, at the very top of the screen, the top of the green up there, is Aphek. So that's where the Philistines are all gathering, that very north dot. The town that they gave to David and his family was down here at Ziklag. So that's how far away it is. Nothing. You can see the mileage. Ian, can you show the next picture? And then for reference, this is kind of the northern region, farther north. So Aphek is now here at the bottom, and where the Israelites were gathering is Jezreel, kind of in the middle of that darker brown area. So the Israelites are up there. Saul had gone up to Endor, kind of, I don't know if you can read that or not, but just north of there. This is where the Philistines are gathering. This is where the Israelites are gathering, and they're going to come together for war eventually. So if that helps you get a mental picture, I always appreciate being able to visualize up or down or went over to this town or down to this town. So that's what it looks like. Okay, any questions on that so far? How am I doing? Clear as mud. Okay, good. All right, I'm going to try to read the whole chapter. It's 30 verses. I think we can do it. I apologize, it won't be on the screen. You have to open up your phone or your Bibles and go along with me, and then we'll come back and step through it verse by verse. So 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 1. Now when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, the Amalekites had made a raid against the Negeb and against Ziklag. They had overcome Ziklag and burned it with fire, and taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed no one, but carried them off and went their way. And when David and his men came to the city, they found it burned with fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. David's 2 wives also had been taken captive, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. And David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue after this band? Shall I overtake them? He answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall surely rescue. So David set out, and the 600 men who were with him, and they came to the brook of Besor, where those who were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men. 200 stayed behind, who were too exhausted to cross the brook Besor. They found an Egyptian in the open country and brought him to David, and they gave him bread, and he ate. They gave him water to drink, and they gave him a piece of cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit revived, for he had not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. And David said to him, to whom do you belong, and where are you from? He said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite, and my master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. We had made a raid against the Negeb of the Cherethites and against that which belongs to Judah and against the Negeb of Caleb. And we burned Ziklag with fire. And David said to him, will you take me down to this band? And he said, swear to me by God that you will not kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this band. And when he had taken him down, behold, they were spread abroad all over the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. And David struck them down from twilight until the evening of the next day, and not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who mounted camels and fled. David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken, and David rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, whether small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything that had been taken. David brought back all. David also captured all the flocks and herds, and the people drove the livestock before him and said, this is David's spoil. Then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow David and who had been left at the brook of Besor. And they went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. And when David came near to the people, he greeted them. Then all the wicked and worthless fellows among the men who had gone with David said, because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except that each man may lead away his wife and children and depart. But David said, you shall not do so, my brothers. With what the Lord has given us, he has preserved us and given into our hand the band that came against us. Who would listen to you in this matter? For as his share is who goes down into the battle, so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike. And he made a statute and a rule for Israel from that day forward to this day. When David came to Ziklag, he sent part of the spoil to his friends, the elders of Judah, saying, here is a present for you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. It was for those in Bethel and Ramoth of the Negeb, in Jatir, in Aurora, in Sifmoth, in Estimoa, and Recall, in the cities of the Jerahmeelites, in the cities of the Kenites, in Hormah, in Bor Ashan, in, I didn't practice these, Ittaketh, in Hebron, for all the places where David and his men had roamed. Okay, we made it. I may not make it. All right, verses 1 and 2. We're going to step through this, if that's all right. So, starting out. Now, when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, the Amalekites had made a raid against the Negeb and against Ziklag. They had overcome Ziklag and burned it with fire, and had taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed no one, but carried them off and went their way. So, a 3-day journey. How far do you, if we look at the picture on the first one again, how far do we think that 3-day journey is? and a half. That's how far it was. Yeah. My commentary said 50 miles. I'll take 60. I'll allow it. That's roughly 15 to 20 miles a day. That seems like a pretty good trek. Seems like they were walking pretty good, especially if they were carrying much with them. Why would the Amalekites attack Ziklag, this town specifically, or the Philistines in general?
Because David had attacked them, so I think it was revenge on David.
So some revenge. What else? Anything else? Yeah. They knew that the Philistines were going to battle and that they wouldn't be around. They'd be weaker and they could come in and kind of take advantage of that. Okay, those are my two primary themes. Either revenge on David or because it was an easy target. Why do we think it's revenge on David?
Because he had plundered the Amalekites.
Yeah. He'd been lying to Achish, saying he was plundering Israel, and the whole time he was doing the same thing to the Amalekites. Except when he went to the Amalekite tribes or villages, what did he do?
Killed them all.
Killed them all. Why did he kill them all?
No witnesses.
Didn't want any evidence. So it wasn't this, I'm going to go take your stuff and run back. It's, I'm going to kill everybody. Women, children, young, old, animals, all of that. So they're now treating him more favorably than he treated them, but it's probably payback time.
Technically, if nobody would tell about it, how do they know it's David?
That's
So it couldn't be revenge.
One of the 600 told.
Because, I mean, the Bible wasn't put in there specifically that no one was left in town.
Yeah, if he really had killed all of the people group, there wouldn't be anybody to know who did it. But I think word travels fast from village to village. They know who's attacking. So even if there weren't any Amalekites left, which there were, I mean, he didn't kill all the Amalekites because now Amalekites are coming back to raid this. So he didn't get them all. And even if he had, villages around would have known, and then the word spreads of this is who's doing these things. I mean, I think we know what's happening in Derby. We know what's happening in Wichita. Like, we kind of hear things. I think word travels fast. Even before social media, they still had their ways. All right, so why didn't the Amalekites kill everybody? If this is revenge, if this is David's been doing this to us, here's our chance. He's gone. There's no one there to protect these women and children.
Slaves.
Slaves? Okay.
I mean, there weren't that many people to kill. Because David took almost 600 men to do battle. So everyone who was left were wives, kids, probably some elderly men, or something like that. That's my opinion.
Yeah. So there weren't that many people. I mean, there's the women and children. Some would say that that's half of the people. So if there were 600 men that went to war, there's at least 600 women and children left behind. If it was truly revenge, if it was out of that hatred for him and getting back at him, you'd think that they'd just come in, kill all the people, take the plunder, and go on. The commentary I read, one of the commentaries also said that it was slaves. They were taking them, kept them alive so they could go back and either keep them for themselves or sell them off for slaves. Anyone have another reason? A bigger, higher reason? God's providence. So we're going to talk about that a lot. That's going to be our answer of the night. So if there's ever a question, just say God's providence. But how God has controlled to save David from having to go to battle against Israel, how, even sent David, when David went to Achish, king of Gath, how he was totally convinced, how he's blinded to what David was really doing behind it. All these little pieces, God's providence just shines through this whole story. That I think that's what I've taken away. So, all right, I'm really bad at spoiling it. There it is. That's our takeaway. One of the takeaways for tonight is God's provision. So I think that's at play here with why the Amalekites didn't just burn them down, kill everybody, and leave them. Any questions on that? I mean, we're only 2 verses in, but okay, verses 3 through 5. And when David and his men came to the city, they found it burned with fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. David's 2 wives also had been taken captive, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. This is just unimaginable grief. I can't imagine going and trying to play your part, be faithful, and you're a warrior and you want to go to battle and you go prepare and do all this, only to be sent away. So you're kind of disappointed in that, and you come home 50 miles away to flames in the distance, seeing your town burn down and not seeing any family around, just the devastation that would be there. Unimaginable. Verse 6. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Do you think David was distressed because of the women and children being gone, or do you think he was distressed because they were going to stone him?
Yes.
Both? Okay, it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both. Yeah, I think definitely you're still grieving, and then in that same moment, everyone's looking for someone to blame. Part of the grieving process, you're angry, you're sad, you're all the things. So he's grieving his wives, and yet he's about to die, and I'm sure is grieving that as well. So David, in that moment, David strengthened himself in the Lord. What does that tell us about David's heart? Yeah, still turns to God, still has a heart for God. In the midst of the lying, he just left the battle line where he's like, yeah, I'm all for you. Yeah, I've got your back. I'm going to protect you. In the midst of that, in the midst of potentially living in sin by hiding in Philistine instead of being in Israel, with God's chosen people, in the midst of those bad decisions and the consequences of those bad decisions and continuing the lie, his heart is still after God. He still strengthens himself in the Lord. So, little side nugget, even in our lives, when we're off on our own, we're making bad decisions, we haven't turned back to God, that still, we're not too deep to turn back to God, to be strengthened by God. David is not a perfect man, and I think for a lot of years, David was one of those Bible characters that we read about and we think, oh, he's perfect, he's great, he's the man after God's own heart. And he struggled a lot, and yet he was faithful. The difference, here's another jumping to conclusion, difference between him and Saul, I have to say this at least once because Hula would give me a hard time if I didn't. It's a heart issue. David's heart was toward God, and Saul's heart, I don't think was. So even in more severe sin that David may have committed, his heart was still geared towards God, and I think that's what sets him apart. So anyway, we all know that. It's just interesting to see the evidence verse by verse by verse. Okay, verses 7 and 8. And David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. And David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue after this band? Shall I overtake them? He answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall surely rescue. Where did we last hear of Abiathar? That was in our recap. We recapped it so you'd remember. Who's Abiathar? The son of Elimelech. And Elimelech, what happened to him? He's part of the 85 priests that Saul killed Doug killed at the order of Saul because they helped David on his way. So the remaining son of those priests is now the priest for for David and his 600 men that had been traveling around. So he shows back up several chapters later. He stayed with him. It's another example of even in David's sin, he's seeking God. He's got a priest with him, consulting God, seeking God's favor, God's guidance in this tough situation. Verses 9 and 10. So David set out, and the 600 men who were with him, and they came to the brook of Besor. where those who were left behind stayed. And David pursued, he and 400 men, 200 stayed behind, who were too exhausted to cross the brook of Besor. 200 men, I mean, there's not much to see in these verses other than the army is whittled down even further. 200 were just too tired. I don't know, I have a hard time imagining that. These are all warriors. They were ready to go to battle against Israel. They're ready to fight. And now because they've been marching, 200 of them all of a sudden just can't continue any further. But whatever the case was, they were not doing well. Verses 11 through 15. They found an Egyptian in the open country and brought him to David, and they gave him bread, and he ate it. They gave him water to drink, and they gave him a piece of a cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisin. And when he had eaten, his spirit revived, for he had not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. And David said to him, "To whom do you belong, and where are you from?" He said, "I'm a young man of Egypt, servant to Amalekite, and my master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. We had made a raid against the Negeb of the Cherethites and against that which belongs to Judah and against the Negeb of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire." And David said to him, "Will you take me down to this band?" And he said, "Swear to me by God that you will not kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this band." So they come across this sick and hungry Egyptian slave who was left for dead by his master. And then he admits to them that he was a part of the raiding party that came and took away all of their family and burned down their villages. David agrees not to kill him. He agrees to tell David where they are if David agrees not to kill him and not to give back to his master. Would you have made that deal? If you were grieving from your family and the loss and the tragedy, and you find someone who is a part of that, do you make a deal to save their life? Yes? If it helps you get your family back, maybe it's worth sparing one life to get revenge on everybody else. You're not just to kill everybody, whatever it takes, go after everyone. It doesn't say that he agreed to it. I think he probably did.
For as many times as God delivered David from the hands of people who wanted to kill him, in David's situation, I can see doing that. In my experience, many times as David did to me, just all the times he's
Will?
It seems to me that that's the most expedient thing to do. Otherwise, they have to torture him to find out the information, and that could take a while.
Yeah, it's better just to agree and let him spare his life so that you can get to the people that you're really after. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone knows what we would do in that situation ourselves until you're in that. We all think, oh, maybe I could think clearly. Maybe I would just be burning with rage. I don't know. We don't know. But it's interesting to see that David seems to be thinking clearly. I think it goes back to his heart for God, seeking God's wisdom and guidance. He seems to be, yeah. Tim, did you have a question?
No, I just want to comment. David has literally learned his lesson that killing people who wrong against him is not the best solution. He learned it with Nabal, and maybe it's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be killing everyone who might not like.
Yes, one of the commentaries I read also talked about David's maturation process, this is one of the signs that show David is preparing to be king, how he's handling conflict, like when Nabal denied giving him some food, butchering some animals and things like that. He got so furious he was going to go kill everybody in his house until the wife came out and said, "No, please don't do this. I'm so sorry." His rage is now calmed, and now he's in a similar situation to be upset about, and he's handling it differently. So yeah, I think that's probably a good point as well. Any more questions on that?
Well, he also had a heart of God. God had said,
Yeah.
"No, you're going to get them." I wonder if he saw this Egyptian slave as part of that answer. He knows what's in their hearts.
Yeah, the slave very well could have been part of the provision from God to help him find his family. Absolutely. Okay, verses 16 through 20. And when he had taken him down, behold, they were spread abroad over all the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. And David struck them down from twilight until the evening of the next day, and not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who mounted camels and fled. David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken, and David rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, whether small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything that had been taken. David brought back all. David also captured all the flocks and herds, and the people drove the livestock before him and said, "This is David's spoil." Why were they partying? The Amalekites were celebrating. Okay, they went, they raided Philistine, they know that they're off to war, they burn down Ziklag and take off the women and children. They go a day or two down the road and decide to celebrate? Why? I mean, wouldn't you be afraid for your life? I mean, you go commit this crime, you go attack somebody else, you know that they're going to come attack back, you know what David has been doing, you know his reputation. Why stop and party?
They wanted to.
Yes, Will?
We gotta remember that they don't know David's after him.
Yep. Where do they think David is?
At war.
I mean, we're assuming that they know that, but I think it's probably knowledge is widespread. They probably hear things. David was supposed to be with the Philistines going farther north, because Ziklag is at the very bottom, 50 miles south of where they had been gathering, and they were going to go farther north up to Jezreel to go attack Israel. So they were pretty confident. They felt pretty good about themselves. They didn't need to run and hide. They were just going to take their time getting home, celebrate, enjoy the spoils of their plunder. They had no idea David was coming back and that they'd have to run and get away.
Would be in a friendly area too. Friendly geographic area.
Yeah, I think once you cross over, you can't see it real well, but the brook of Besor is kind of down here, and that's the boundary line. And so I think once they got across that, they kind of felt like they were in safe territory, back in their own land. I don't know, if I went and burned down villages and plundered other things, I don't know how far away I'd have to go to feel comfortable. I think it'd be farther than this, though. But they're a bit more confident than I would be, I'm sure. Yeah, they definitely did not expect anyone to be coming. So David kills every one of them, except 400. Those 400 got away on camels. I don't know what the significance of camels is in this story, other than they were fast. It was the expedient way to survive. Was this God's providence? The fact that the raiding party comes into your land, conquers other villages, not just you. It wasn't specific to just David. They didn't just come, attack Ziklag, and leave. They kind of came and made a sweep and other villages and other things. Then they got to Ziklag. Then they get back, and they just mosey back home. They're kind of taking their time. They don't get back to their own towns, their own protection, their own villages. They're just kind of sitting there waiting, and at night, drinking and partying. God's providence or just chance?
Everything passes through God's hands for a reason.
Yeah.
And so I think that it was God in control, and God knew exactly what he was doing.
For sure. I think it's really easy for me to read these stories in the history, and sometimes I get in a hurry and say, okay, that's just what happened. They just stopped there to have a drink and eat their food and enjoy some of the stuff they got. The more we settle in and we stop and we kind of churn through it, God's hand was in this, because it doesn't make sense to me. That's not what I would have done in that situation. I think God's hand in protecting David, sending him back at the right time before the people got away, when they were still, having their party and not prepared to fight and all those things. God had a plan for David. God had a plan for Israel. And this is how it's playing out. Not how we would have chosen, not how they would have chosen, but this is how God ordained it. And I think it's definitely God's providence that they were there waiting and David came upon them. Any questions on that? Okay, we got a little bit more to go. Verses 21 and 22. Then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow David and who had been left at the brook of Besor, and they went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. And when David came near to the people, he greeted them. Then all the wicked and worthless fellows among the men who had gone with David said, "Because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we had recovered, except that each man may lead away his wife and children and depart." So they meet back up with the 200. I think at some point it also talks that they stayed with the baggage. I don't know what baggage warriors had on them, like what luggage they took up to Jezreel or down to chase after this band of marauders. But apparently there was something that they stayed and kind of protected. Who were the wicked and worthless men? Part of the 600. And the 600 from our recap were who?
These are the debtors.
The debtors. Yeah. So I'm going to make an assumption here. This may not be accurate, so don't quote me on this. But I think it was still the people who joined him when he was fleeing Israel back in chapter 22, his brothers, his father's house, and everyone who's in distress, in debt, and who's bitter in soul. I think it's still the same people. I think those are the men that they're talking about. So to clarify that further, were they already wicked? Were those wicked and worthless people from the start that have been hanging out with David and living over here for a year and a half? Or are they only worthless and wicked now because they don't want to share their spoil? Is that greed what makes them wicked and worthless? Or was who they were to begin with? Who they were to begin with? They're both? Yeah. Maybe that's evidence of who they already were is how they're acting now.
This is their acute stage of their chronic disease.
So David, a man after God's own heart, the ordained next king of Israel, as God's chosen, has run away from God's chosen people to live in Philistia, among the Philistine people, with wicked and worthless men for a year and a half. That's who he's hanging out with. That's who the king of Israel, God's chosen man, is living among?
That's who he's hanging out with.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we're all sinners, so I'm rating them as these guys being worse than the Israelites. Well, the Israelites are bad too, so I don't know that they also could be called wicked and worthless, just like these guys are. But apparently, they have traits that set them apart. Why was just giving the 200 people back their family and their people, why was that not fair? If they didn't go fight, why do they get the spoil? Why not? Okay, here's your family. You get what you lost, but you don't get any extra. You didn't earn it. You didn't work for it. Why is that not fair?
Well, they were with David all this year and a half, all this 18 months. They were with David, fighting alongside everyone else. It's just fair to, I mean, at that very moment after marching for 3 days and 3 nights, or whatever the case may be, they might have just chickened out. I don't know. But David is gracious enough to give them what they may not deserve.
Okay. What else? What other thoughts?
Followers of David. So they had been with them through this whole time and through all of the previous raids of plundering that he had done.
So maybe they were loyal to David, so David wants to be loyal to them
It could be,
through all they've been
and
through.
we don't honestly really know the ages of these men or their health conditions.
Does that matter? Their ages and their health condition?
Well, I mean, if
Maybe they
it's
needed
going
some extra.
further, I mean, that would be Egyptians.
Yes, Scott?
The 200 could have been older soldiers, older than.
So if they were older, they're more deserving of sharing the spoils, or? I'm not arguing that. I'm clarifying. I apologize.
Of the younger men.
Sure.
So they wore out quicker.
Yeah.
It's not like they were accused of
So maybe it's not that they wanted to stay. Yeah.
able to follow these things.
Yeah. Okay. Janet?
I think similar to what you said about other decisions that he made, we're seeing him mature, and now he's making more kingly decisions, but this is more of like a national style decision that he's making, and obviously the
Yeah, he implemented a law that kind of enshrined that way of going about things. Yes, sorry.
I think personally, David having his heart, he's a man after God's own heart, reminds me of the story of the workers that went out, some of them went out in the morning, they got the same pay as the ones in the evening. So maybe David is looking at it like, they're all in this together, like all of us. It doesn't
Sure.
matter if you make it into heaven on your deathbed, or if you make it into heaven at the beginning of your life.
Trying to find a more fair way. Sure.
David knew he didn't deserve anything. God gave him.
Yeah, David's perspective is that this was God's provision. Well, that's the real answer, Lyle. Thank you for stealing my thunder. I was going to debate it a little bit further before we got there, but yeah, my answer is look at the next verse. But before we get to the next verse, before we do that, I don't know. I guess it's back to our wisdom versus God's wisdom. You get what you earn. I mean, you have to be there. You have to show up to work to get the wages. You have to put in the time. And I get the loyalty. I get those things. But if they waited behind, that's fine. You get back what was yours. You don't get any extra. You didn't come to work that day. I don't know. I guess no matter what I think, what we would do, our wisdom says, we know what God's wisdom is. Rich, you want to say something?
I mean, in the verse it says, the evil man said, you can take your wife and children and go. They're not even giving them back the stuff that they originally had.
So maybe they weren't giving them everything?
The plunder from the other villages that they took that.
Yeah.
But at least offer the stuff that they had. They just they included children to get out of here.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about that.
So the ultimate, yes?
Perhaps they were just really pushing hard because it said they were too exhausted to continue. So maybe for those 3 days, they were really working hard and maybe they really did overexert themselves.
Yeah.
So David's like, they really were tired. They stayed back because they were tired. I'm going to give them what they got.
Yeah, maybe they could have been serving a different role back at camp, protecting things. They could have been doing other stuff, but I think
Watching the stuff, too.
yeah, yep, they were watching this stuff. So they didn't win because of combat. They won because of God. God delivered. This was God's provision again, not their mighty warrior strength and skills. This was God's provision. And so in the next verse, 23, but David said, you shall not do so, my brothers, with what the Lord has given us. It's what God has given us. It's not what we've earned. It's not what we went and got. What God gave us. I lost my spot. He has preserved us and given into our hand the band that came against us. There it is. Who gave us the stuff? Who gave the band that came against us? God did. Who would listen to you in this matter? For as his share is who goes down into the battle, so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike. And he made it a statute and a rule for Israel from that day forward to this day. So you shall not do so with what the Lord has given us. That's the answer to all of it. Verses 26 to 31, we're going to kind of hit the last few here as we wrap up. When David came to Ziklag, he sent part of the spoil to his friends, the elders of Judah, saying, here's a present for you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. It was for those in Bethel and Ramoth of the Negeb and Jatir and Aurora and Siphmoth and Eshtemoa and Rakal and the cities of Jeremielites and the cities of the Kenites and Hormah and Borashan and Attica and Hebron, and for all the places where David and his men had roamed. Where did the spoil come from? Because they got their families back, they got their stuff back, but it seems to describe a spoil above and beyond that. Where did that come from?
Just what I said earlier about other villages that they raided also.
Yep, all the other villages. So this wasn't just their stuff coming back, this was everyone around them, their stuff pulled up. So they have the spoil. Specifically, sorry, Denny, you want to?
It interests me that they got everything back.
Everything. Yep.
They didn't lose one thing that was lost, they got back. Even the sheep and cattle.
Yep. I think that's a detail that's worth noting and not glossing over. This wasn't we got most of it back. We kind of recovered most things. I got one wife back, but not the other wife. Got everything back. Didn't lose a thing. So I think that is very important. Another way, God provided in a way that his goodness would shine clear. If it was only partial, okay, well, we did it on our own. We went and clawed it back and got it ourselves. The fact that everyone and everything was returned as it was, I think that's evidently God's provision. Also, part of it, this wasn't just them raiding the Philistines and taking from the Philistines and then David getting to take spoils from the Philistines. They also raided Judah. And so this was Israelite plunder and spoil that David now has. So would it be right for David and his men to take from what was stolen from his people, from the tribe of Judah and from the Philistines, and just keep it for himself?
No.
That's David's perspective. So I think since God delivered, David decided to share with God's people. So he sent gifts back throughout Judah to kind of redistribute, kind of pass things back out. Part of this also may have been from David's intention of this, where has David been roaming all these years, this year and a half, whatever? Through Judah, through these people. He knew them. They were his people. They've looked after him. They haven't killed him. They haven't attacked him. So I think there's some faithfulness to them, maybe. So how does David's generosity compare to other kings and how they would handle the same plunder? More generous, yeah. Most kings were concerned with building their wealth and their kingdoms and their storehouses. And David, on this road to becoming king, to being God's anointed, shows that he's going to treat things with a perspective focused on God, that it's God's people and God's provision, and share it with them and spread it around rather than hoarding it for himself. So I think this is part of the maturity process, along with how he handled the conflict, how he's handling the wealth, how he's handling some of those things. One of the commentaries also talked about this didn't hurt his future kind of acceptance as king of Judah as he comes into that, because he handled this rightly and sent out the gifts to the kings and the people and spread things out. That definitely helped his future as king. Yes, Lau?
Could that be considered also compared to like a tithe? That's a bad question.
I guess we'd have to know more about how much he sent out, whether that would be a tithe back to God or not. I have no idea. So none of the commentaries I read spoke on that, and I would hate to presume one way or the other. Okay, so here's my 2-minute recap. We started chapter 21, 22, 27, 28, 29, looking back at all of that, how God David had interactions with this king, the trust that he built with this king, what Saul was doing, Saul chasing him, the hard spot that he put himself in by trying to be faithful to this king that he'd been lying to the whole time. And now, I think, as we saw God providing a way out from the battle, even in going back what would seem like a bad situation, something that no one would ask for, to have your village burned and your wives and children stolen. It's all a way for God to show his provision and his work amongst Israel, to be faithful to David and the kingship that he's going to give to him. All these little details that I think every time I've read it, going through in the last month or two, it's like it's another story, it's another battle, it's another thing. But this time, like, the little details really rose to the top for me to shine out of God's providence and God's hand at work. It's not just another battle. It's not just another story. It's not just another tale. It's God's plan working itself out for his provision to be evident to the people and to David. And so I enjoyed looking back and going over that. Any final questions on it? Anything stand out to you other than that? What else? I think there's several things we could take from it, but what major themes stood out to you? Yep.
How God is so faithful. I mean, we fail every day.
Yep.
And, he's always there to fix that.
Yep.
Provide for us. David failed many times.
Yep.
Was
Yeah, God's faithfulness. As we raise back up and we look at David's life at this point, there's lots of issues in David's life, lots of sin going on, and God is faithful to David. David's heart is still turned toward God, but no one would argue with God if God decided to smite David at this point or do something else. That's not God's plan, and we know that, so it wasn't going to happen. But David's got issues, and God's faithfulness is greater. Any other things stand out? Okay. Right on time. That makes me really happy. Not too early, not too late. All right. Well, let's pray, then we'll be finished. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for how it nourishes our soul, how it reminds us of your faithfulness. Lord, thank you, even with my short-term memory issues, Lord, that I don't remember well. I'm forgetful, and I overlook your grace and your mercy in my life. That this has been a reminder. It's been a good reminder for me of how you are working things out in our lives when we don't see it, we don't understand it, when things don't add up to the way we would do it. Lord, we need to have our hearts turned to you. We need to rely upon you and cling to you and seek your will, not our own. And as we go from here, may we keep eyes open to see your hand at work amongst us. May we be obedient to follow you, and may it be for your glory and not our own. May we honor you with what we say and we do this week. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.